Happy Friday morning to you. It's November 12th, and you are tuned in to Real Talk. It's Jesperson here with Hoyles and Brooks, and there's something special going on in the studio this morning. Can't quite put my finger on it, but we're feeling good to be doing a live show for you. If you're checking this out later on the podcast, thanks for that. Thanks for making us one of Canada's most checked out podcasts. Means a lot to us here at the team. A little bit later on in the show today, we're going to get into our leaders of today and tomorrow. Top 40 under 40, Real Talk Roundtable. One of our guests is going to be the founding CEO of Bitcoin Well, our title sponsor, Adam O'Brien. Would qualify for under 30 lists, actually. Attaboy. But he's top 40 under 40. What are you smirking or scowling or twisting up your face at?
Hoyles, what is that? What's that on your face?
What is that expression on your face?
It was more just like, how to make a person feel bad about themselves.
No, that's not
just
the
under
point.
40,
That's
but
not the-
under 30. You're an under.
But that's what makes him so special. There can't be everybody. Not everybody can be super duper successful by, well, he was at like 22. It actually is. It is a little annoying.
A little?
You know why, though? Because he saw something coming and he went all in on it. And Adam O'Brien's story is remarkable. You can read about it in Edify magazine. And Adam's going to be with us coming up live in about a half hour's time. Let's do this, Sam.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
I'm going to start the show with an email right out of the gates. This is from Jennifer. Talk@RyanJesperson.com. Jennifer says, I'm a 41-year-old administrative assistant in Edmonton. I've suffered from treatment-resistant depression for most of my life, and I'm currently on medical leave receiving electroconvulsive therapy, ECT. Jennifer says, I've been catching parts of your show live while on leave. I woke up at 8 o'clock this morning, and I realized that I was up early enough to watch your whole show. She sent this to us last week. I was up early enough to watch the whole show. Instead of, oh shit, another day, I actually had something to look forward to this morning, and the show is excellent. Thank you for a glimmer of light in a mostly crappy existence. That from Jennifer. I wanted to start with a reality check today with a shout out. We call it Real Talk. We keep it real. Jennifer, it means the world to us to know that you join us live. Why don't we say this show's for Jennifer? This one's for Jennifer. Love it. Thanks for your email. You can be in touch with us anytime. Talk@RyanJesperson.com. Coming up in about, Sam, can you load up the Premier's tweet? We want to show you Alberta Premier Jason Kenney's tweet from yesterday. Everybody was talking about it. We're going to talk to Professor Trevor Tombe, an economist out of the University of Calgary. His story in the Financial Post had a bunch of people pretty excited, including Alberta's Premier, who says Alberta's swagger is back. He's quoting from the piece, says, I couldn't agree more. Alberta, says the headline in the piece by Jeffrey Morgan, Financial Post, November 10th, Alberta's on the verge of another boom. Will it be more sustainable this time around? So we're going to get into that with Dr. Trevor Tombe. I know that a lot of people will be excited if, Alberta's swagger. We got like live mics, so we're hearing how's the coffee this morning?
It's delicious.
Good. You just decided to keep the mic on so we can all hear you just hitting it up?
I think I had like a tiny comment in the intro that I didn't say, and I forgot, and I left my mic hot, and it's just
it's a very dangerous position to be in front of a live mic when you are unaware.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is.
I sort of wanted to do you a bit of a solid in case you're like,
there's a great scene in The Naked Gun that proves that.
Yes, you're exactly right. The famous urinal scene. Amazing stuff. So we're going to get into this, but it had us talking. We have a production meeting every morning, of course. And we started talking about industry and activity, and there's an email coming up, amazing one, in Trash Talk today. I want to get the guy's name right because it's like Merrick the Redhead Prick. That's how he signs off. And but he's not a real prick in his email. As a matter of fact, his email's all over the place, which is amazing. But he said something in the email that resonated with you, and you two agree on this. He writes it in an antagonizing way aimed at you, but you both feel the same way. So I don't really know maybe he's just being a redhead prick. I don't know. His words again, not mine. Gingers are beautiful. I've got a whole friend circle. They're like all gingers. They'd let me, the brown-headed prick, hang out with them. This is not a slight against gingers. It's Merrick's self-appointed name. I'm just for purposes of accuracy, I'm just telling you about his email. But he goes on and he says, with pipelines, and he's a welder, so he's not like he's trying to cook up business is what he's trying to do. But he says pipelines is not a question of if, but when they will leak. But he says, and I'm sort of ruining his trash talk right now. I don't want to take too much from it. But he says, just like planes, trains, and automobiles, maintenance is key. And he's a welder, so, kind of thing. Got us talking about pipelines, and I don't know. I mean, I have the luxury of declaring that this show is pro-pipeline, but then you have to offer all of these caveats. And the unfortunate thing is if the show is Real Talk Sarah Hoyles, I don't know as a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure, I don't know. But we love having these conversations in the gray areas. Sam, we cut you off in the production meeting because I said I'd rather just hear it live, because then we can get legitimate and real reactions. And anytime you start your sentence with, as an engineer, we pay a little closer attention. So what was your take on pipelines?
Like putting my engineering hat on, I guess what I'll say is that, and like this is with so many qualifications, right? If you need to transport fossil fuels, then pipelines are the safest way to go.
Yeah.
But we're also in a scenario right now where more pipelines means more demand for oil, which means more oil is going to be extracted, more oil is going to be burned. So, we're kind of in this dichotomy of, I don't know if you guys have heard the concept induced demand. Urban planners talk about it a lot with traffic. It's basically the whole idea is that if you build bigger, wider freeways, people will get more cars to fill them. And I think pipelines kind of work a little bit in that same way, is that by building more pipelines, we are inducing a demand for oil.
Well, let me ask you, to be fair, is the construction or expansion of pipelines addressing and capitalizing on existing global demand or even responding to forecasted future global demand? Or is the expansion and construction of pipelines causing more people to demand that energy? Buildings, vehicles, all of the things that require energy resources.
I think it's a little of both, quite frankly. Like, there is an existing global demand. We know about that. And, the trope that we get from industry executives and government officials is, well, if people are going to be buying oil, it should be Canadian oil. But, at the same time, it's creating a scenario where we're going to be burning more oil.
Hoyles.
Barf. I mean, is no one paying attention to COP26? The fact that we're being told that whether or not we get our act together, we are set for a we're already in climate emergency. I mean, the city of Calgary just announced a climate emergency.
Live on this show exclusively. You're right. So
it's just great. I love that we can make more money. But
that is the thing. I mean, employment, jobs, is a thing.
If
making more money generates the tax revenue that pays for the hospitals and more healthcare workers. And maybe I'm being a little bit, I'm not being devil's advocate, actually. That is a fact. It's all about finding the balance. These are the gray areas. These are the conversations we have to have. This is where they're happening. I love it. I mean, you mentioned COP26 wrapping up today. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says that basically when you're talking about net zero, if you're going to be serious, you've got to take action, and it's got to happen now.
Net zero pledges require rapid, sustained emissions cuts this decade. And I welcome the recognition of this fact in yesterday's US-China cooperation agreement that I consider an important step in the right direction. But promises ring hollow when the fossil fuels industry still receives trillions in subsidies as measured by the IMF, or when countries are still building coal plants, or when carbon is still without a price, distorting markets and investor decisions. Every country, every city, every company, every financial institution must radically, credibly, and verifiably reduce their emissions and decarbonize their portfolios starting now.
That's Secretary General of the UN.
Yeah, laying down the hammer.
It's got to happen now, right?
Not tomorrow.
Yeah.
Not in 2 weeks. Not in 10 years or by 2070. No. Now.
Yeah. So I'm curious to know where Trevor Tombe goes on this. He's going to join us in just a second. Now, the whole point of, talking about, if Alberta's swagger is back, we haven't even got into the email or the tweet. I mean, I can get into the tweet a little bit, but I'd rather not waste time on, sort
what?
of like
On what?
vapid type things. But, these trolling efforts, you can tell by the style and the emojis. You can tell exactly who wrote it. And I'm not going to be hook, line, and sinkered away from focusing on the stuff that matters. But if Alberta is on the verge of another boom, if Alberta fiscally can expand the way that experts think it can in 2021 and beyond, what does it look like? What industries are involved? What does it require from a policy standpoint, from international investment? What does it mean for potential, perhaps immigration implications? Perhaps people within Canada already coming to Alberta, the city's building. This is going to be good news for those in the construction industry, for those that are in the trades. What does that mean for, you're wincing again. This is fact, Hoyles. I don't know what would you rather? I'm not trying to be a jerk, but
Were you going to say jerk or were you going to say something else?
I was going to say asshole, but then I was like, yeah.
It's a little early.
It's a little early. It's Friday. It's going to be a feel-good show. We have the top 40 under 40s coming up in our round table. I don't know if I can't speak for the two of you, but I think the smiles, we're just in a good mood today. It's a great
we're in a good
vibe
mood
going
today.
on, right? I've got. I don't even know what we're going to do about these emails because I've pulled like 15 emails to read, not part of Trash Talk. Plus, we've bumped Eat Your Words to today. It felt kind of weird doing it on Remembrance Day, so we're doing it today instead. So we've got a lot of content today. It's going to be a lot of fun. But just real quick, like what do you like when I'm like economic activity and growth and construction, people working, and you're like
I don't understand why that is the only measurement that we look at.
It's absolutely not.
And the fact that we're like, we need more growth. Do you know what is perpetually growing? And like what that is characteristic of is cancer. A cancer, a parasite. So the fact that we're
but
like,
you're talking
we gotta
about
keep
things
growing.
like the job market. You're talking about things like people having opportunities to. Like if somebody moves, this has happened in my life with friends of ours. We're so excited. 3 different groups, if you will. One of them, one person, and then 2 families. They've all chosen Edmonton or the Edmonton area as their home from other provinces, specifically from Ontario and BC, in the last 6 months to a year. And it's amazing, especially for the families. You're making it. I don't know exact dollars. We don't really talk about that kind of stuff, but I can forecast if you're living in downtown Vancouver and you have like good jobs, but not unbelievable. You're not CEO. You're not, playing center for the Vancouver Canucks. Maybe the household income's like, and this is a lot for some people, and it's not a lot for some people, but the household income's, let's say, $225 to $300-ish, 2 people working-ish, approximately. And then your cost of living in Vancouver is like like if you want to have not even like a nice house, if you want to have just a normal house.
A condo.
If you want to have a condo, but if you want to own a house, if you want to own a home with like a little backyard for your kids that's not east of Chilliwack, if you want to live anywhere, like let alone, we want to live in like Kitts or like West Van, or forget about that. But a regular, normal, unspectacular house is like $2.25-2.5 million for like a regular house. And so people come to Alberta and they can get, if you want to live in the suburbs, depending on your priorities, whatever, but you can get into the housing market for like $300, $350, $400, like $500,000 gets you an unbelievable house. $1 million gets you a palace. It's just different. And so I just think that's good news for a lot of people that haven't worked for a long time. But yes, obviously you and I are on the same page with, and is Trevor Tombe ready to rock? He's probably like, are these guys going to stop so I can start at any time? How perfect to roll into one of Canada's most recognized, renowned, and followed economists. Yeah. But I do get what you're saying. And Sam, your analogy of like widening the freeways and causing that more demand and growing the suburbs big time. It depends what business you're in. I guess I wouldn't say we practice what we preach because I'm not preachy. I grew up in the suburbs. It was wonderful. At the same time, we live very central right now. That's one of our priorities. I work downtown, host events. We got a downtown studio. I'm everywhere I need to be in 8 minutes. It's wild. I couldn't do that in Vancouver. Decent house, nice big backyard, like 5 minutes from downtown. Are you kidding me? That's like $5 million. No way. So I don't know. But I'm with you. I don't think that big sprawling cities, and keep in mind that's more expensive, right? We've got to create police and fire service out there. We've got to build new hospitals, new schools, the infrastructure.
I know that the land is cheaper out there for developers, so that's why they go there. But really what ends up happening is they're downloading the costs onto the city and onto the taxpayer, who then has to pay for those, for the plumbing and for the power and for everything. Whereas if we
at
actually
the cost of maintaining central infrastructure.
Absolutely. And that's over time. I mean, if we were to if there were higher prices on the onset, right out of the gates for those developers, there just shouldn't be it shouldn't be incentivized to grow outside of the city and beyond the limits that are already set.
Okay,
but I digress.
And we all need to digress because we've got Trevor Tombe, and I'm looking forward to checking in with him. But first, let me just remind you, I want to tell you about a couple of things that are important to know. Friesen Brothers. You know, Friesen Brothers has 16 locations across the province of Alberta. I don't think I'm officially authorized to be talking about this yet. So I'm just going to kind of hint at something.
When has that ever stopped you?
Yes. Well, advertisers, it's a little bit different. But I think, but here's the thing. I don't think yet, and I'm going to check it. I'll have an update for you on Monday, but I'm not going to, but they have these holiday, a Christmas meal box type things going on. And I think you can choose how big you want it to be, what your budget is, all that kind of stuff, what you want in there kind of thing. Well, they sent us one yesterday and said, here's one for you just to check out. And it's literally you put it in the oven for 60, 70 minutes, let it sit for 10 minutes, and wham, just done. And so our meal last night was top notch. Red Seal Chefs there, right? So I know that they're kind of going to be like, wait till we give you the details, dummy. But I'm enthusiastic. I'm excited about it. I can still taste it. So, not really. I brushed my teeth this morning and everything, but metaphorically. So at Friesen.com, it's where you can learn more about Friesen Brothers, which, of course, for more than 65 years has been Alberta grown and Alberta owned. And I'll have an update for you on those Christmas meal boxes. Unbelievable. We also wanted to remind you that our friends at Dairy Queen, the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, we're talking about Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road, have that flamethrower burger going right now. Unbelievable. 100% all beef patty with the fiery flamethrower sauce. Not a mild sauce. Pepper jack cheese, jalapeno bacon, tomato crisp lettuce served on a warm toasted bun. Top it off with a sea salt toffee fudge blizzard, and you've got the Jespo recommendation at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park for the month of November. So says the Financial Post, Alberta's on the verge of another boom. Will it be more sustainable this time around? A whole bunch of people were talking about it because Alberta's premier pushed it out by way of his Twitter account. Says Alberta's swagger is back. He pulls from the piece, says, I couldn't agree more. He had his staff. I know a lot of people were talking about this. Doctor up the graphics. You can see there they took the liberty of taking some downtown towers from Calgary and sort of just adding them into Edmonton's skyline. Which is just, I don't know. Anyway, not important. I mean, depending on your perspective. Trevor Tombe is a professor of economics at the University of Calgary, a research fellow at the School of Public Policy. Everybody looks to him on Twitter at Trevor Tombe to make sense of things like this and cut through all the noise. We're grateful that the good doctor has made time to check in with us today. Welcome back to the show. How are you?
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Hey, so what's the deal with this piece? Because let me be very clear. People can take issues with a government or a leader of a party, but we get pretty excited if good news is on the horizon with regards to the province that we call home. So what do you make of this feature in the Financial Post?
Well, so no question 2021 is going to be significantly better than 2020, but we shouldn't forget that 2020 was particularly bad for Alberta, where the amount of contraction in economic activity here from the latest StatsCan data just a few days ago showing we contracted by 7.9% last year. And that exceeded the pace of contraction seen in any other province by a pretty wide margin. So even though, it does look like this year Alberta will lead the country in growth, we will still not be fully recovered. And when combined with the big contraction in 2020, us, along with Newfoundland and Labrador, are going to be behind every other province in terms of where we are relative to 2019. So there's still some ways to go, although, of course, I'll take any good news for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's driving this, do you think? I mean, with regards to what's specific to Alberta or what the average person, a person like me, will be able to understand?
Well, the simple fact of what's driving the increased expected growth this year and hopefully next is oil prices being a lot higher than where anyone reasonably projected they would be. Right now, trading over $80 per barrel and has maintained that level for quite some time now. That's about double where oil prices were this time last year, and about $20 per barrel more than where we were seeing back in February and March. And Alberta produces so much oil, about 1.3 billion barrels in a year, that every $2 to $3 per barrel translates into about a full percentage point increase in the overall amount of income that's generated in the province.
I remember reading somewhere, is it accurate that they say every dollar that it goes up is about $1 billion in revenue implication? Is that accurate?
So for income economy-wide, that is about accurate. Absolutely. And then income for the government, that same dollar generates about 300 million or so, give or take, if sustained over a whole year. So no question, oil prices are driving the change in economic growth and income that's generated in Alberta this year. And I guess it's kind of an open question of how long oil prices remain at their current levels. You know, this is a lot to do with global growth increasing a lot more than what many anticipated would be. And so that increase in demand for energy is driving prices worldwide to be higher than it was not too long ago.
I'm picturing there's this GIF that people share often, and it's one of the doctors. I wish I knew his name, but he's the redheaded doctor with the beard from Scrubs, and he's just like holding this panel and just like slamming his face into the panel. And I imagine that a lot of people are banging their heads against the wall right now because they're going, hang on a second, the swagger's back and the premier's excited and everybody should be excited and Jesperson's excited, but we're talking about global oil prices and the price of oil again. And why haven't we learned that we're not supposed to get super duper excited about this, because we're supposed to have an economy that maybe doesn't rely on the price of oil? That's a little bit naive, but at the same time, diversifying the economy. And I know that that's what a lot of people's expectations are right now. How are we doing on that front?
Well, I think a couple things to keep in mind. First, high oil prices translates into high incomes, revenues for businesses operating in that sector, royalty revenues to the government, but it doesn't come with employment growth in the same way that increased activity in other sectors would. So unemployment in this RBC report that's cited by the Financial Post there, unemployment still remains above the national average, not just this year, but even in 2022. Unemployment rates in Alberta will exceed what we see in Canada elsewhere. And we're currently now about 150,000 jobs short of where we need to be just to recover from the last recession. So we went into COVID in a pretty difficult way already. Now, in terms of diversification, that's a buzzword that is thrown around a lot by all parties, and is strongly related to activity in oil and gas. So when oil prices are high, we systematically see people raising that as an issue. But I'm not sure that that's really Alberta's core challenge. If we look at where the jobs are and how employment is distributed across sectors throughout the economy, we're more diversified than many other provinces. Even when you account for all of these indirect jobs, like the accountants that are tied to clients in oil and gas, even when you do that, Alberta does not stand out as lacking diversity in our employment. Where we lack diversity is in where we generate our income from. And that leads to volatility in income. But a lot of that volatility is borne by corporations, and investors can diversify their own portfolios. I think where we should focus in terms of policy is diversifying how we fund public services. That's something we directly control, and we consistently rely on a volatile revenue source. That's royalties off of oil and gas primarily. And that's something we choose. And so I think our attention should be directly aimed at things we can control, which is our budget, rather than thinking we can structurally change the economy in a big way, which is really hard for governments to do.
Well, and I think especially just if you're being real and being reasonable and employing common sense, I recognize, let me kind of like back you into the corner a little bit, my friend, and let me ask you to respond. I'm not sure if you heard the UN Secretary General's address this morning, but he basically said that there was reason for optimism around this new deal with the U.S. and China. And he says if anybody's going to be serious about net zero, basically if anybody is serious about saving the planet, it has to start right now. And he started to talk about a whole bunch of things, including carbon pricing. But that obviously, that kind of stuff ripples through Alberta, right? You've got Calgary's mayor, Jyoti Gondek, the morning after the election on this show saying her first order of business is to declare a climate emergency. I mean, what kind of a message is that sending to the sector and to the province and for that matter to the country?
So I tend to look more at climate policy choices that governments make rather than kind of pronouncements and marketing and messaging.
Sure.
And I think Canada's done actually quite a bit over the last few years. Alberta did lead the way in bringing in big, robust, rising carbon prices, even those that covered oil and gas. We have over a decade now of experience with carbon pricing in that sector and ramping up to $170 by 2030. That's, I think, an important thing that Canada can do, and Alberta really should stop resisting an efficient, low-cost means of addressing our emissions. I don't think that necessarily imposes undue burdens on Alberta relative to others. Certainly, no matter what we do, there's going to be costs to adjust how we do things to lower emissions, no question. But if we have carbon prices, let markets sort out how emissions are reduced, then that comes with the least economic disruption of all of the measures that we have available. And so that's something where Alberta can really help move the conversation forward by not resisting what should be core components of Canada's approach to addressing emissions. And we currently are, and I think really just for partisan purposes.
Dr. Trevor Tombe, our guest. Jeffrey Morgan did a great job on this piece in the Financial Post. We did invite him to join us. He was unavailable, but I wanted to point out a few key points he makes and then get your, I want to sort of like put in pieces here to a reality and then get you to maybe tie them all together or provide some perspective. So on the good news front, for example, on Monday, I think it caught people's attention, certainly in Calgary, when Amazon Web Services announced it would spend $4.3 billion on a cloud computing hub in Calgary. Could be about 950 jobs there. The province, this is good news for certainly jobs minister, finance minister, posted a record year for venture capital investment in 2020. 51 deals struck for $445 million, just under $500 million. That's 100% up over the year before. Home sales in Calgary hit a record for the month of October, just under 2,200 transactions. I mean, geez, there's some reality checks too, though, tough ones. If you look at, downtown office vacancies, commercial real estate vacancies, there are a lot of lights turned off in the downtown cores. So how do you manage? There's some really encouraging news there. There's sort of the stark reality, like I said, of those darkened office towers. So how do you piece it all together and say, kind of, here's what you'd say is going on for the average person that wants to understand what the next, 3, 6, 12, 24 months might look like?
It's always difficult to predict where economic growth is going to go, especially in a province like Alberta, where shocks to unpredictable things like oil prices matter so much. But yeah, there's hopeful signs for sure. Increased activity in transportation and logistics, which is how I view the investment by Amazon and others. Increased technology investment and jobs in Alberta. That's very positive. It's not unique to Alberta either. You're seeing increased employment and activity and investment in that sector in many provinces. It's really part of technological change that's going on globally, and it's great to see Canada being a part of that. I think some visa problems in the United States might be helping Canada capitalize on recruiting skills and employers. And what do we do about downtown office vacancy in Calgary? That's a tough one because you do have a lot of primarily oil and gas firms that just employ far fewer support activity and administrative jobs than they used to. And even with high oil prices, those jobs are not coming back because the companies are just quite a bit more efficient than they used to be. And so that's a real challenge. There's not going to be an easy way to address it. I think a big part of the solution will be converting some of this space from commercial to residential. I know that's a priority of the municipal government here in the city of Calgary. And so that's going to make a big difference, I think, sustained over time, but there's no silver bullet here. And economic growth is going to be difficult because a lot of the employment that was displaced from oil and gas back when oil prices fell in 2015 and 16 were young workers, and many of them had lower levels of skill. And so I think investing in education and skills training to really help people shift into other activities, that needs to be central. And when you look at provincial government policy choices on the budget right now, the exact opposite is happening with post-secondary institutions. And I don't just mean universities, but across the board, really getting squeezed. And that's a big challenge for us adjusting to the shocks that we've been trying to manage for now years.
Always appreciate your insight and your analysis and your ability to make this stuff understandable for guys like me. It's great to see your face again. Thanks for it.
Well, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
That's Dr. Trevor Tombe, an economist on the University of Calgary. I always feel like after he comes on the show, I'm always kind of like, okay, now I can kind of maybe sound like I know what I'm talking about a tiny little bit. You know what I mean? Because you look at these numbers, I mean, it's like Amazon's building this and there's record. I can't wrap my mind around some of the real estate stuff that's going on. Record month in October down in Calgary. And then all of a sudden you're like, but look at Calgary's downtown office towers. And you're like, what? Who's buying who's setting the records on the real estate side? Anyway, I appreciate Dr. Trevor Tombe joining us. He just noticed, like, he signed off talking about education and skills training, and what a perfect opportunity for us to remind you that Athabasca University is Canada's online university. And at athabascau.ca right now, you can learn more about their programs and courses. Just the other day, on Wednesday, we're talking about bilingualism in business, and we just checked out on the fly the drop-down menu there, programs and courses. I was like, I wonder what they have if people are looking to brush up on their French or maybe even just start learning French. Like maybe you've never maybe you've never studied French in your life. You just go to the top, you click on search, French, boom, up it comes. All of the options that they have there. How cool is that? 100 search results for French, including a Bachelor of Arts in French. Or you can just take the individual courses. That's just one thing. That's just one. You can learn so much more by checking them out online today at athabascau.ca. Our friends at the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra are back. How exciting is that? They've got some amazing productions coming up. You can check them all online at winspearcenter.com. Edmonton Symphony Orchestra concerts start at $25 plus service fees, except for they're a little bit less for Real Talkers. That's because the exclusive code RealTalk gives you 10% off symphony concerts. Some restrictions apply. Of course, all the concerts are distanced seating. You've got until tomorrow night to get your tickets. Why wait that long? For Peter and the Wolf, it's a Symphony for Kids concert coming up November 13th. You're going to want to check out the time and everything online, winspearcenter.com. And Arrival, a spotlight on living composers, including the Winspear debut of the piece composed by the annual Young Composer Project winner. That's November 19th, Arrival. Tickets online at winspearcenter.com. Keeping it classy, rolling from post-secondary to the symphony to our wine of the month. Feeling pretty good about ourselves here today. Brewer Clifton is Real Talk's wine partner of the month for the month of November. You can check them out online at brewerclifton.com. Learn more about their priority allocation, about their commitment to sustainable farming. There's great information on their vineyards there, and you can kind of understand what goes behind the business that's being steered by the 2020 Winemaker of the Year per Wine Enthusiast, Greg Brewer. You can check him out there online. Their feature again at brewerclifton.com. Ask for Brewer Clifton. My personal recommendation is the Brewer Clifton Santa Rita Hills Pinot Noir. Very good. If you're a Chardonnay fan, they've got a great one there as well. And you can learn more about the Wine and Beyond exclusive ex post facto Syrah at Wine and Beyond's, or of course, that's exclusive to Wine & Beyond. Ask for Brewer Clifton, their bigger catalog anywhere you buy your fine wines. Well, every week, this week it's a Friday. Typically, we do this Thursday morning. We rack them and we crack them. We take a look at items in the news, and ultimately, we work our way through and invite somebody to Eat Your Words. Presented by Prairie Catering. Now, how could you ignore the story of Green Bay Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers? Yeah, you knew this was coming. He's bound for the Hall of Fame. He's got one Super Bowl, but still considered one of the all-time greats. It's annoying. Listen, everybody. Rodgers, Brady. Brady's the GOAT. But I'm not a Patriots fan, so really I don't care. What I do care about is athletes using their platforms to, I don't know, deny science, point millions of people in the wrong directions. So you're familiar with this story, right? The Packers quarterback winds up getting COVID-19. Everybody's going, well, how does that? Everybody goes, and yeah, you can get sick if you've been vaccinated. But everyone says, well, that's interesting because at the beginning of the year, he said he was vaccinated. And he's not been following the NFL protocols for unvaccinated players like masks and media availabilities and all the other stuff. And then people went back and checked the tape like you do in sports. And they found out that he said he'd been immunized. Well, what does that mean? It means that he was doing a whole bunch of wackadoodle stuff and reading his aunt's posts on Facebook, allegedly. Actually, not true. I think he's estranged from his entire family. Relevant or not, you decide. So he goes on, and then he does this interview. And so he gets suspended, and everybody's like, what the hell? And it's kind of seen as his last year in Green Bay anyway, because there was the contract dispute, and he wasn't going to show up. And what's going on with Aaron Rodgers? He does an interview with former NFL punter Pat McAfee. And he basically talks about how the left woke mob is coming at him and he's trying to cancel him and all this kind of stuff. Basically because he lied to there's more than 1 billion NFL fans easily on planet Earth. There's probably several billion NFL fans. He lied to everybody. Well, of course, people were quick to point out that, if anybody got canceled in the NFL for anything, it was probably about 5 years ago when Colin Kaepernick, the then quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, started kneeling during the anthems, in protests of violence against black people, igniting conversations around race and policing and activism in sport, and Kaepernick kind of paid for it with his career. Well, the reason I say kind of is we don't need to get too into the weeds on this, but a lot of people are like, Kaepernick was not exactly John Elway or Joe Montana. And whether that's relevant or not, no NFL team wanted to touch him with a 10-foot pole. That guy's career was pretty much canceled, right? You remember when LeBron James wore that shirt? I'm pretty sure it said, I can't breathe. And then a Fox News host told him to basically shut up and dribble. Well, this whole thing quite fairly had people tweeting an invitation for Aaron Rodgers. What about this from Frederick Joseph, who says the shut up and dribble crowd's been real quiet about Aaron Rodgers suddenly becoming one of the top scientists and doctors in the world. What about this one from Alex Montoya? Where's the shut up and just play crowd when it comes to Aaron Rodgers? And this one, a great tweet. And when I saw this one from Crystal Campbell, we knew we wanted to read this. She says, when black athletes speak out against racial injustice, they're told to shut up and play. When a white athlete spews dangerous, unscientific talking points and places others at risk, he's lauded for exercising his civil liberties. Crystal's not wrong. Well, I think it's pretty clear who the person in the spotlight is in this week's edition presented by Prairie Catering. So as far as we're concerned, there's a lot of privilege at play here, and you still haven't apologized for lying to everybody. So number 12 for the Green Bay Packers, it's time to Eat Your Words. Presented by our friends at Prairie Catering. Just a reminder, Prairie Catering is operating out of the stunningly beautiful Art Gallery of Alberta. If you're looking to book an event, maybe a Christmas party, maybe something in the new year, you need a lot of space for people to sit comfortably. You're not going to find a more beautiful venue in the city than you will at the Art Gallery of Alberta. If you let them know that Real Talk sent you, they got special pricing for events all the way through to the end of the year. And of course, if you'd rather do a distanced event for your staff, for your friends, for your family through Christmas, maybe you're going to gather virtually, Prairie Catering caters to different spots. They can work it out with you depending on the size of your group. I've worked with them personally before. It's why we're partnering with them now. You can find them online at prairiecatering.ca. Our friends at Prairie Catering have been such good friends to this show. prairiecatering.ca, your number one destination for all things catering in the Metro Edmonton region. I don't know if my heart's going to be able to take Eat Your Words and Trash Talk in the same show, but luckily we've got some time to hand over the mic here. I'm really excited to basically use this platform, this Real Talk Roundtable. It's our Friday morning tradition to introduce you to three movers and shakers. These are leaders of today and tomorrow. Our friends at Edify, a beautiful magazine, have recently released their top 40 under 40. The annual list, on the cover, our good friend Puneeta McBryan, course, the straw that stirs the drink at the Edmonton Downtown Business Association. And then within those pages, 3 faces, 2 familiar to this audience, and 1 making his debut on the show. It's a real pleasure to introduce you, our audience members, to our 3 panelists today. You know Adam O'Brien. He's the founding CEO of the company that just so happens to be our title sponsor. Bitcoin Well has been with us since day one. Founded in 2013, the company offers convenient, secure online and in-person solutions to help buy and sell Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Puneeta McBryan is the executive director of the Downtown Business Association in our home city of Edmonton. Before she took on that role last year, she was a consultant strategist in the fields of marketing, branding, and communications for a bunch of public and private sector clients across the province. Robyn Paches is president of the Oliver Community League. While serving as at the U of A, he served as VP of Operations and Finance for the Students' Union there. He's the co-founder of Workspace Co-working, and we're going to be talking about that a lot today. Kind of a cool tie-in there because Adam and his team is building a big new space right now. I want to talk about the future of working. Puneeta, of course, has her eye on all downtown trends, so there's a lot to talk about. Hey, is it? I don't think it's disrespectful. I'd hate to be disrespectful, but can I call you cover girl at least once? Or personal, I'm pretty excited for you to be on the cover of a magazine celebrating the top 40 under 40 in a city of 1 million people. Is a pretty big deal. How does it feel to be on the cover?
Thanks, Ryan. I don't think it's disrespectful. I think it's wild to be on the cover of the issue. So thanks for that. It was so strange to find out. Nobody warned me, and my little guy was actually sick the week that the issue came out. So I was like at home, covered in toddler snot, and my phone started blowing up with all my friends informing me I was on the cover of this issue. So it's just an emotional roller coaster, and really, really cool.
Well, I have to grind your gears a little bit because I happen to know that you have a 4-foot by 6-foot cardboard copy of that cover, and I also happen to know that it is at your house, and I requested that it be behind you for this interview. There it is with you and now Edmonton Mayor Amarjeet Sohi. That is a massive. Where is that going in the house? Is that like above the fireplace, or is that, where are you putting that in the house? Front door, maybe?
I don't know what to do with it. It's so absurd. One of my girlfriends took one of them. Who knows where that's going to end up? Yeah,
who knows? It'll be used somehow.
It'll show up as a cardboard cutout, I'm sure, at some point. Yeah, I don't know. My son thinks it's hilarious. But yeah, I don't know. I think I might just have to take it to the office. I think we're all done looking at it at this point.
Well, it would help remind everybody who's boss down there for no other reason. So it might be a good idea. Adam, I hope I'm not trying to like make you blush or anything like that. This is a compliment. But I was saying to Sarah, I said, Adam could wind up on a business leaders list for the under 30s. You're not even 30 yet. This has been a pretty rapid ascent. I mean, 2013, I guess you've been doing this for 8 years now, but I mean, gosh, you were in it like kind of almost just right out of high school. This has been basically your professional career.
Yeah, my whole life dedicated to sound money. It's been a good ride for sure. It's been a lot of fun.
So what did it mean for you to wind up on this list of top 40 under 40? Because there's, when it comes to Bitcoin, I spent a lot of time listening to podcasts about Bitcoin, and you've helped me understand a lot about it. Does it, to you, solidify Bitcoin as a thing in the court of public opinion when you as a business leader wind up on lists like this, or am I reading too much into it?
No, I think you're bang on. I think the Bitcoin community, I would say, hasn't necessarily been well received by corporate America or corporate Canada or traditional finance, let's say. And so the fact that, just because I've been a leader in this industry, to be recognized with these incredible minds in Edmonton is really, really special, and it's quite an honor.
Robyn, you do a whole bunch of stuff, and I haven't even mentioned like you're a volunteer firefighter, you're a power lifter. I mean, we can get into all that stuff too. I really want to talk to you about workspace co-working, and I want to pick all 3 of your brains on that, on the future of office work and the future of community, and all the things that go into the trends, how we see work playing out. But is it fair to say that you're perhaps most prominent in the public eye, based at least to this point on your work as president of the Oliver Community League and the gutsy conversations that you've been having about changing the name of one of Edmonton's most populated neighborhoods?
Yeah, that's totally fair, Ryan. I think that's the most public thing I've had. So the whole entering into the public eye has been a bit of a new adventure for me, but I've been excited about it. Yeah, we've been having a big conversation on Oliver, important one, be it difficult one, but one with a lot of opportunity. Essentially, we have the most dense community in Edmonton, just under 20,000 people, with the population projected to double over the next few decades, having a real opportunity to redefine themselves into a new, exciting identity that's one that better represents all the people that currently call Oliver home. We're incredibly diverse, and I think it's a lot of folks look at it as a difficult, challenging time, but really what we've been looking at it as is a real opportunity to redefine and set ourselves up well for the future.
Can you bring us up to speed on where that process is at right now? For people that don't know, I don't want to take this for granted. Oliver, which is basically a whole ton of things in Edmonton, are named after Frank Oliver, who participated in politics and all those kind of things. But I think, Robyn, correct me if I'm wrong, perhaps most relevant to this conversation is Frank Oliver's work as a publisher, a newspaper that carried a lot of sort of anti-Indigenous and, quite frankly, very racist content. Is that it's a very general and quick, but it is a fair assessment of the reason why you're considering this name change?
Yeah, it is fair. I think the most prominent thing, he was not only the publisher of the Edmonton Bulletin, the founder of the Edmonton Bulletin, but a lot of what he did in his policy work as a federal minister had a huge impact on where we're at today, on setting up policies that pushed Indigenous peoples from their land, kind of almost changing the direction of Canadian immigration from a young budding country, essentially letting as many people in as possible to build, into much more restrictive. I believe the phrase he liked to use was building like the ideal British state. He pretty much didn't like anybody that wasn't the ideal British white. I am background of Hungarian and Scottish. He would not have liked me, and I'm one of the whitest guys you'll meet today. But so just like for your listeners, that's a good bit of an overview of why we're having that conversation. We've had a number of calls to action from our community to act on. And I can give you a bit of an overview now too of where we're at. Very quick in a couple sentences, as we've been working over the last about a year and a half with communities to make sure this process is correct. We're taking our time to do it right. And we just finished an RFP process to find a professional partner to ask the community and Indigenous nations and all affected populations what they think and where we should go. And we're just in contract negotiations with a provider. So stay tuned in the next couple of weeks. We'll have some major movement.
For people that aren't living in Edmonton or aren't familiar, the community of Oliver is just west of Puneeta's, I guess, what do we call it? Your jurisdiction, in a sense, with the Downtown Business Association. Has the DBA taken I'm just out of curiosity, has the DBA taken a position on the Oliver name change or the bigger picture of these types of initiatives? And do you forecast an impact on business in the downtown core?
It's a good question. We haven't weighed in or taken an official position, mainly because, to your point, it's not actually within the downtown business improvement area. But it's interesting, like a lot of that neighborhood that is currently called Oliver is actually without a business improvement area right now. There's the 124th Street BIA, which is really just 124th Street proper. And then there's us over downtown. And there's talks about, do we shift the boundaries of both BIAs or one to make sure that those businesses do have more formal representation. And then that is an interesting part of the conversation about the neighborhood's name too. And I think it could be a very cool opportunity for attracting visitors, attracting businesses, to really brand that neighborhood with something new and that feels more true and relevant to the community.
Adam, can you remind me, your company, Bitcoin Well, is currently building a space downtown. You're taking over a very prominent space downtown, storefront, beautiful. Is it like, can you remind me how many square feet?
It's over 30,000 square feet.
Yeah, 30,000 square feet. So your business obviously has been growing big time with regards to your number of employees and your revenues. We talked about how you were on the Globe and Mail's fastest growing companies list. Your revenue up 254% in the last 3 years. Was downtown a no-brainer for you? You're moving, Puneeta, this is music to your ears, I bet. You're moving north of the river, Adam, from another beautiful part of town where a lot of commerce happens in Old Strathcona, just off White Avenue. Why downtown?
Yeah, downtown had, well, first of all, like the space was important and getting the right amount of space and the right footprint of space was pretty important. But I think that the downtown community is so strong. And I mean, you have Puneeta and her crew making sure that businesses want to and are comfortable downtown. And you've got the other, prominent technology folks downtown, Jobber, Alta ML, to name a couple, kind of right in the vicinity where we are. And, the spot that we chose right down the street from Rogers Place, down the beautiful 104th Street promenade. And it's a pretty exciting spot to be. And it's a beautiful building. So we're pretty excited to get in there. And we see it really as a retention tool more than anything else. I think that working from the office is past the days of, it's for productivity and this and that. Working from the office is something that team members should want to do. And I think our space is going to reflect that. And so the environment has to reflect that too.
And I just want to say really quick, when Bitcoin Well made that announcement, it was shortly after I started in this job. And I got to say, starting this job in the middle of the pandemic, which we've talked about before, challenged my mental health in a lot of ways. But that announcement from Bitcoin Well could not have come at a better time. Like, I met Adam that week, I think, when they made the announcement. And I just think the leadership that they're showing right now, that, everyone sort of recognized the value of in-person collaborative office space, but nobody really stood up and showed leadership, especially at that time, the way that Adam and his team did. So I'm so grateful, because that was a good news story in a week when I really needed a good news story.
We're not saying exactly where it is yet. Puneeta, I don't even know if I told you this yet. Maybe I told you already. I don't remember. But our new studio that's under construction right now, we're gonna be able to hit Adam's new place with a golf ball. So we're pretty close. And I'm not talking like an Adam O'Brien golf. We're not 350 yards away. We're closer than that. But for us, it was a priority too. I want it to be downtown. I want to be where the buzz is happening. I want to be in the mix, and I miss it. Quite frankly, we've got a great studio here, but it's a little set outside the downtown core. There's just a different feel to it. Puneeta, when we're just talking to Dr. Trevor Tombe, the Economist, and Robyn, I can't wait to hear more about what you're doing with regards to the workspace, the field, that sector, that industry. But Puneeta, you can't ignore the fact that while housing markets look pretty good and some economic forecasts look good and the price of oil looks good, at the same time, and Edmonton's maybe a bit more insulated than Calgary is from this right now, there's a lot of lights turned off in downtown towers. And I bet you there's a lot of people that are wanting to renegotiate leases or that are looking to downsize, keep more workers at home. How are you managing this as ED of a downtown business association?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's one that I've had this conversation so many times since I've started. And for the most part, it's been everyone trying to look into a crystal ball about what are employers actually going to do and what types of long-term decisions are actually being made. And luckily now we have some actual data, and a lot of those decisions have started to be made over the past 6 months or so. Avison Young just put out a report 2 days ago that actually shows that Edmonton's leading the country in terms of people getting back into the office. I think there's something about the Edmonton culture, especially the business culture here, around collaboration, about community. Our downtown's also a lot easier to get in and out of and get around in compared to a lot of other really, really dense cities, which, I mean, hopefully will change at some point, but for now it seems to be working in our favor. So I don't know. I mean, it's a weird time. We had a lot of large employers returning to the office with big commitments to return to the office in about October, all the big ones. We've got EPCOR, ATCO, the city of Edmonton, the province, the federal government, all these big employers were heading back before the fourth wave hit us. And so really now that's just a bit of a delay. And then, what I'm seeing in reports like the Avison Young one, and then more informal conversations, is that, yeah, there's a little bit of downscaling for companies that are renegotiating their leases right now or whatever, but it's not an abandonment of office space.
Right.
It's saying, okay, we don't need every single senior leader to have their own big office. Let's figure out how to get the most out of our space, maybe take a little bit of a smaller footprint. And it's more about rethinking what we do with our space and how we use it to bring people together. And to Adam's point, how we make it a place that people actually want to spend time when they have the option of working from home too.
And that's huge, right? That's where, I mean, one big thing to be obvious, is this trend around co-working and co-work spaces. And I toured one that maybe wasn't a great fit for what we were looking to do, for some reasons, but for other reasons that appeal, where you see people want to go in. I'm like, they have beer taps, just like the kegerators there. It's just like, I'm like, what? I said, well, when do you turn the taps on? He's like, yeah, they're on the whole time, like 9 a.m. You want to go pour yourself, a sea change? I'm just going, what? Okay. I know when to say, not a good fit. So we're not going to be there. But Robyn, you're doing some pretty cool stuff with workspace co-working. You're the co-founder there. Bring us up to speed on what this is doing with regards to, nobody roll your eyes. Okay, I got to use the word, but disrupting some of the workplace trends. What are you doing differently?
Yeah. So thanks, Ryan. I think what it kind of leaps off of what Puneeta just said about really rethinking what we do with space. So at Workspace, what we're doing is we're reimagining co-working. So a lot of what my own personal experience with co-working is exactly what you experience, where you walk in, there's beer taps, there's wine tastings, it's probably upwards to $400 or $500 a month per individual. And then it's also quite expensive for small upstart companies that want to get in there. I've also been a remote worker since before the pandemic. So I all too often have gone to other cities to visit client meetings. And then I'm jumping between cafes, trying to find a collaborative place to work that works well. And then I'm late for my client meeting and I'm completely unprepared. So what Workspace is doing. And then on the flip side, I also love restaurants. I love food and love beer. It's great. So, and then COVID-19 has really hit the service industry hard, with constant closures and reinvestments and patios and different types of ways to innovate. And I got to give them credit for innovating where they have been. Workspace, what we're doing is we're reimagining the way that people work. So we're partnering with restaurants and cafes and other underutilized spaces to repurpose their spaces into co-working. So from an individual standpoint, they log on, pick a place, book it, and jump in, and then they can go work in that space. And that space is a repurposed place. They can also have confidence that that money that they're spending as a user goes right back into that business. So the big passion part of it for me is the fact that, let's say a local restaurant has a corner that they'd rather use a couple of those tables for co-working. That's an alternative revenue source that they can use that's not completely reliant on their service industry income. So it's diversifying their income and then giving people a flexible way to work and bringing them together for collaboration. Because I agree with Adam and Puneeta that collaboration is key. I've been co-working for so long, remote working for so long, and I don't see my team until every 4 to 6 months. You can't have the same kind of banter over Zoom unless you're on Real Talk that you do when you're in a normal meeting.
Adam,
I think
go ahead.
Just to build on that, I think that when you're innovating and innovating the way that Robyn and Bitcoin Well and so many other places are downtown, it's so important to have that accidental conversation. The best analogy that I have for this is in a Tesla, you can set the blinkers to make a farting noise in the cab when you put the blinker on, and I just can't imagine that was an intentional conversation or decision from someone. I have to assume it was like the end of a long meeting and someone was like, oh, the cars should fart. And someone was like, oh, that's a great idea. And you don't get that afterwards accidental conversation when you're not in person, feeling the energy of the room and seeing the hand. I mean, look at me, I'm talking with my hands. You can see half of it on Zoom here, but when you're in person, you're in a boardroom, you're in the office, you're in the bullpen or whatever. It's just so much more exciting.
Did you hear about they don't want, it's PETA that started it, but they don't want it called the bullpen anymore. Did you hear this?
I know.
The arm barn.
Yes.
I actually think I think bullpen is it sounds cool kind of, but I guess the implications are also a little nasty. But arm barn to me actually sounds cooler.
I like it. We actually we're designing a new bit of arm barn for the office here, and someone called it a bullpen, and then in brackets said sorry PETA on the Slack message, which was quite funny. And I hadn't heard of arm barn before, so there we go. My messaging is officially switched.
If I know anything about you, Adam, you were in your current location, which you're soon to be moving from. I remember when you were putting that together, and you were showing me around, and you had all kind of cool. I mean, now they seem, a little bit mainstream, but you have the walls go up with like these big, huge Lego block looking things, and all these cool. At the time, was pretty innovative. So what's an example that you're willing to tell us about? What's an example of something that you're doing with this new space, 30,000 square feet to play with? What's something that you're doing that's like ahead of the trend? Like what's the thinking behind it?
We're actually taking things back in time for our kind of like, one of our interesting pieces. We've got a real tree going into the middle of the space, and we're hanging hammocks. I think 3 or 4 hammocks around the tree, and we're gonna have like an actual paper book library full of like the way that I've termed it is Bitcoin propaganda. I probably shouldn't say that too much publicly, but full of just Bitcoin books for the team members and guests to come in, hang out in a hammock, and read an old-fashioned, no blue light book. So we'll see. I'm quite excited about that. There's a bit of a sneak peek into our design.
You probably could have found, if you looked hard enough, pretty cheap Kijiji available living wall from down at the legislature grounds. The government ripped that one out. Maybe you could have got it pennies on the dollar.
No. The government is far too unreliable for that. That thing has been burnt long ago.
It was like, I don't know. I can't even laugh. Like it makes me
sad.
It's like sangry, kind of like sad and angry. Because do you remember, Puneeta? You remember someone tweeted the photo. It was just like all the plants had just been pulled out, were just thrown outside. I was just like, It was a metaphor. I don't know if anybody wants to step in that one right now.
It was such a tragedy. I still struggled around my head.
Unbelievable. We're hanging out with Puneeta McBryan, Executive Director of the Downtown Business Association in our home city of Edmonton. Robyn Paches is president of the Oliver Community League and co-founder of Workspace Co-working. Adam O'Brien's the founding CEO of Bitcoin. Well, we're going to be back with these three in just a second, but I want to remind you, we partner with Westworld Computers, and they've been great to us, kind of answering the demand of what we've needed. Most especially is, Hoyles and I, we got to keep our stuff organized. People see us on camera from time to time. You remember I was getting all these notes from people, including from another partner of ours, Local Waste, presenting Trash Talk later. Mikkel, CEO over at Local Waste, he's like, Hoyle's laptop is on like a box and a stack of magazines. He's like, do we need to bring something by for you? I was like, no. We're going to go to Westworld and get, it's just...
I love how thoughtful they all are. Like, is Sarah okay?
Is Sarah okay typing her stuff on like an Amazon box and a bunch of magazines? Just kidding. The box was probably from some local retailer. It was definitely from a local retailer. Westworld Computers is finding solutions for little things like office aesthetics and accessories, all the way up to the big dogs like the iMacs and whatever's powering your commerce or your messaging at home. You need something small, modest to just surf the internet with, check your social media. One of those, iPads might be a good fit, or one of the MacBooks. And then, of course, they've got everything else. They've been family-owned, your Apple experts for more than 40 years. Also, big shout-out to our friends at Kubi Energy. Jake's always posting, or this team is anyway, on their Instagram of all different kinds of ways they're helping people find sustainable energy solutions. They're all about solar energy solutions to power your life. You can visit them online at kubienergy.ca for a free quote. Make sure you let them know that Real Talk sent you. You can check out the drop-down menu on their products and services, including off-grid solar. They have those Kubi cubes, basically like shipping containers covered in panels. Your cottage, your cabin is off the grid, or maybe you're endeavoring to get there. Maybe you bought some raw land. You want to put a trailer out there. Kubi Energy has a great solution via kubienergy.ca. Adam O'Brien's the CEO of Bitcoin Well. Puneeta McBryan, Edmonton DBA, and Robyn Paches, president of the Oliver Community League. Three of them on Edify's list this year. Edify Top 40 Under 40. It's a beautiful issue, and you could pick it up if you live in the city of Edmonton, if there's any left on newsstands. Be honest. Who wants to? Adam, you go first. Be honest. How many paper copies of the magazine did you take off the rack?
I actually saw them at Remedy for the first time, so I grabbed two from Remedy, but then my our director of marketing, Karen, who you've had the pleasure of meeting and we're quite proud of, she had a whole box, and that
Yeah.
was, I think my mom was quite happy about that, and grandma and all the rest of it. So yeah, a couple paper copies floating around.
You're gonna want those to show you're gonna want to show those to your kids when they grow up. Puneeta, we already know that you have a 4x6 foot mock-up of the cover. How many how many paper copies did you snag?
Well, so we actually have a magazine rack outside of our office, which is in Bell Tower.
That is a flex.
By. Yeah, so we have a box. So I've told Stephen Sandra, the editor, that if we run out, I'm going to need another box, because I think my whole extended family might murder me if I come home for without a copy for everyone.
Yeah, I think you're right, Robyn. I know there's a whole bunch of businesses in your stomping grounds in Oliver that have these magazines. Have you had a chance to pick up a few? Is anybody confessed to picking up like 80 copies yet?
So similar to Adam, I grabbed a couple at my hairdresser's, actually. I was there getting a cut before the event, and I saw 2, grabbed them. And then I'm pretty sure my mother single-handedly rated the entire event of what was left. And then my partner's grandfather in Sherwood Park, I'm pretty sure has rated all of the copies in Sherwood Park. So Edify, you might need to send some more out to Sherwood Park.
There you go. I wanted to ask the three of you about the idea of relatively young leadership. Puneeta, for yourself, I mean, you come into certainly when I say a traditional organization, I mean, it's been around for a while, and there's been some pretty prominent executive directors there. You come in your 30s. How do you approach that? I mean, knowing that you're going to be steering a team, is it difficult to establish yourself or to set that tone relatively young in your career?
A really good question, and it's a really tough conversation because the top 40 thing is such a trip. And I'm glad you pointed out how young Adam is. Robyn is also very young. So they're younger than me. And I feel pretty weird about this kind of recognition this young. I feel like it sets the bar really high at a really young age. And I feel like the spotlight's kind of there now. And so that's a lot of pressure. That's probably something I got to work through in therapy at some point. But the organization, and, I think, if I'm not incorrect, which I don't think I am, I think I'm the youngest ever, the first ever woman, and the first ever non-white person to be at the helm of the DBA. And the organization's existed since 1985. Yeah, it's wild. Although not that surprising when you really think that hard about it. So I had this moment when I walked into the office the first time, because in our old boardroom before we moved into Bell Tower, we had your pretty typical boardroom where you had the class photos sort of all the boards and executive directors going back to, I think it was all the way to 85, or at least into the 90s for sure. And it was a pretty white wall, and a pretty middle-aged and even older than that wall as well. And so as much as I don't think that hard about such things, and honestly, through the process of getting the job, and before I walked into the office for the first time on my first day, I hadn't really thought about it. But when you see it there in front of you on the wall, it's pretty hard to ignore. So that was a pretty interesting moment of recognition that, okay, this, regardless of what kind of leader I am or how I talk or how I approach things, just by default, because of what I look like, I'm bringing a pretty fresh and different change, I guess, to the organization. So, I mean, I could go off on a whole tangent about.
Feel free, Puneeta.
Okay, I'll do it. Just this whole thing of, normally people would call that feeling imposter syndrome. And I'm going to butcher it, so I won't go into depth, but I highly recommend everyone read the Harvard Business Review article called Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome, because it's not that. I mean, I have a fair amount of self-doubt, which is a healthy amount of self-doubt. I think in order to be a good leader and a strong and intelligent person, we all have a little bit of that. But the reason we talk about imposter syndrome so often, I think with women, particularly with women of color, is it's actually a whole lot of external factors that make it really hard to ignore the fact that we are, especially as leaders, oftentimes stepping in and we don't look or sound or act maybe anything like the people who came before us. So, I'm from Northern Alberta. So being, the only non-white person in the room isn't really a new thing to me, but it is a high profile position and it's a public position. And to your point, we've had some very high profile and really talented and great individuals who've come before me. But I think the board sent a strong signal, maybe on purpose, but by hiring me. And so I guess I just try not to think about it too much, because at the end of the day, I just have to do the job. And we've got a big job ahead of us right now, but I don't really have the luxury either of just doing the job. I kind of have to be very conscious of the fact that whatever I do, whatever stumbles along the way or whatever success is, kind of by default, then get associated with female leadership, young leadership, and leadership from people of color.
Puneeta, every once in a while I have an opportunity to pull back the curtain a little bit, and I don't know how you're going to feel about this question. So we're sitting here listening to you, and you're amazingly articulate and well-spoken and innovative, and your perspective's amazing, and everything's positive. And then the producer of this show, and I just think this is a little peek behind the curtain, holds up a piece of paper. I don't know if you want to show everybody. The piece of paper just says, Ian. And I'm like, no. I'm like, and so I'm like, no. Like, no, because Ian O'Donnell, who had the role prior to you, executive director of the Downtown Business Association, remind me if he was fired or if he resigned. But basically, he went late at night on Twitter. He was basically like, everybody says Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. And I'm not here to drag Ian or anything like that, but it was very high profile to the point where he paid for it with his job. And then so I'm like, no, I'm not asking it. And then you hold up the paper again, and the paper just says Real Talk. And so how can I call the show Real Talk if I don't ask you if you had an extra bit of heavy lifting to do when you came into this new role, based on the fact that by association, the Downtown Business Association had found itself kind of stepping in one, and a lot of people were demanding accountability from the organization.
It's a totally valid question, and thanks for that, Sarah. Actually, no media have actually asked me the question yet.
Are you serious?
Yeah, no.
Hoyles is doing a dance now in the producer's chair. So, okay, well, thanks for taking the question.
Yeah, I think all of us here for sure know Ian. I can say personally, I know he's not a bad person. I think a lot went into that moment in time. And I think he's been forced to do a lot of self-reflection and taking a bit of an inventory. And it is what it is. I think the heavy lifting that had to be done, though, was taken on by my board. Like, what they then had to sort of muddle through, you join a board like this, like the DBA, I hate to say this is maybe unfair, but the organization's kind of been on autopilot for like 30 years. Like, it's not a huge undertaking to join the board of an organization like this. You don't ever expect, I don't think, that you're going to be navigating, society's biggest and most challenging conversations when you're the chair or even just a board member of the Edmonton Downtown Business Association. So what they went through in 2020, on top of everything else that downtowns have been going through, was huge. And they showed a lot of leadership. They showed strong leadership, and they listened, and they had, I think, I can only assume, I don't know any of this for a fact, but I think they had very blunt conversations with Ian and with their partners and stakeholders. And I'm sure they very easily could have picked a very qualified new executive director who looked and sounded a lot like the previous executive directors, and they didn't. They picked me. And so honestly, I think it gave me sort of an automatic mandate in a way that I normally might have had to fight a little bit harder for. Some of the things that I've felt completely free and comfortable and confident to call out, some of the investments in community that I've been able to make, honestly really come more easily because it's coming from a place of this is a new Edmonton Downtown Business Association, and these issues matter to us. And so I don't think I can say that, the job's been harder in any way because of that, other than I will say that the impact that had on the team can't be overstated. And I don't want to say too much. I'm sure the team is listening right now, but like one of our team members is Black. That wasn't an easy time, I'm sure. So that part was the harder part for sure.
Puneeta, thank you for keeping it real. I really appreciate that, like, very much. Adam, I want to circle back to the previous question that Puneeta originally took on, just with regards to, establishing yourself in a significant leadership role. I mean, in your case, maybe it's a little bit different because it's your company. You founded it. You're the CEO. You've been the CEO since day one. But in the last 6 months, Bitcoin Well became, as far as we know, or at least Canada's first publicly traded Bitcoin ATM company, and maybe even on planet Earth. I'm sure you'll know. But you're a guy in his 20s, and you're sitting around these big boardroom tables, and these big businesses happening. And to the tune of, I would imagine. I mean, I don't know if. I guess you're publicly traded. You have to open up your books. Maybe you can give us some perspective on quarterly or annual revenue. I mean, it's a huge company doing big business. Do you have to kind of, I don't know, climb a hill that maybe somebody in their 40s or 50s or certainly their 60s doesn't have to?
Yeah, I guess to an extent. I think that I'm lucky coming as like the second wave of technology, or to use your buzzword from earlier, disruptive entrepreneurs. And, you look at the likes of like young entrepreneurs before me, Zuckerberg, Dorsey, and not that I'm anywhere near the same league as those guys, but I think the world is somewhat used to crazy young guys doing crazy young guy things. And so I think that I have that luxury. But certainly, the number one comment I get when people meet me or see me, especially without my beard, is, "Oh, wow, you're so young." And, to be honest, I took that as a badge of pride early on. But, as I got older, I really realized how much of an identity that was to me. I was the young entrepreneur. I'm a young dad. My wife and I got married young. I have taken a lot of pride in hitting milestones early on. And now, as I approach the ripe old age of 30, I find myself, looking back fondly, but also looking back and thinking, oh, wow, I'm no longer going to be the young entrepreneur. I'm no longer going to be the young dad. I'll just be the entrepreneur. I'll just be the dad, which is fine, but it's definitely an identity shift that is required. And I also think too that our world emphasizes age, I think, too heavily, and I don't know that age. I think it's more experience that matters than days on planet Earth. I've got heaps and heaps and heaps of experience. They say 10,000 hours. I had 10,000 hours of Bitcoin experience like my 2.5 year into it, because that's all I did was just Bitcoin stuff. And so from that perspective, I'm like quite a bit older than the majority, or have more experience than the majority. Like you said, I've been running this business for nearly a decade. I've got a lot of business experience. And when you do something for 15 hours a day, not to be hyperbolic, like literally 15 hours a day, you gain that experience quickly. And I think that, days on planet Earth is less important than how you spend those days on planet Earth. And so I think that our world should shift to experience rather than just strictly birthdays.
Robyn, have you, in the course of your, through your role with the Oliver Community League and talking about this name change and undertaking this big review that I would imagine is probably like a 6-figure review on its own, but will have a ripple effect. We've seen the Oliver Square. It's a massive, for people outside Edmonton, it's huge. It's like, feels like 6 or 8 city blocks of just big, like grocery stores and a whole bunch of things, the post office and all that jazz. Unity Square, I think they just rebranded to, right? Is that right? Unity Square.
Yeah, that's correct.
So that's pretty significant. I mean, as a corporation, I don't know who owns it, but I mean, they did that on their own. But I mean, the pool will be renamed and the parks will be renamed, and there's obviously a ton that goes into it. On the age front, and I don't want to try to twist the question too much, because I'm not implying that everybody over 40 thinks it's cool that it's called Oliver and everybody under 40 doesn't think it's cool. I'm not suggesting that at all. But I would imagine that you've had people that kind of detract from the initiative, people that scoff at it, know the woke, young, left, radical, yada, yada, right? The social justice warriors, the soy boys. You get all the slurs thrown at you because this is the woke mob coming to cancel somebody else. How do you respond to that as a community league and as a leader?
Yeah, so you're completely right. There's absolutely been a subset that have taken that hard stance of this is not something that I agree with. And I've had all kinds of stuff like that thrown at myself and my team members. And it was something we prepared for going into it. We knew what we were getting ourselves into. And the way that we've responded to it, and I don't want to just generalize that there's one subset of the population based on age or their background or their experience in the community that we get that more from. It really boils down to who's willing to talk. So we have had people from all backgrounds, all walks of life, all ages, come to us completely against the name change and not understanding it, and change to be some of our biggest supporters based on just sitting down and having that conversation and understanding the stories of how we got here, why we got here, and the experiences that these people, that the people who Oliver wronged, still continue to go through. I think one of the things that really impacted me when we first started this process, because I'll admit my own ignorance, when I started in the community league about 3.5 years ago now, I started in a different position. I had no idea about the name change. I had no idea if Oliver was named after a person, let alone who that person was. And I think there's a large portion of the community does. It's not an intuitive thing to research the name of your community when you move there. Maybe in today's society now, but not as much at that time. And once you do that research and find out and learn, you get there. So all of those, the real important part was just people coming to the table and having that conversation. And we've had people completely flip.
I've got an interesting comment here from Chelsea, who says it's sad that literally just being responsive to changes in society is scoffed off as being woke. I don't know. I also kind of find too, though, that when it starts, you have insults hurled at you, it's typically from people that don't have a lot to say. There's not a lot of sort of a foundational understanding of the issue. There's not a reasonable or logical rebuttal. So it kind of just gets down into the muck and mire. So I've never really, it's never fun to be called names, but I've always kind of taken it, to be honest, as a bit of a validation.
There's a side of me that does that too. When I was young, and I still do, I still one of my hobbies is I love gaming. I still game back in the day, and when you're on a level and you get to a harder part and the enemies keep getting harder and they keep throwing more at you, you're going in the right direction. Sometimes I think about that and it kind of motivates me that we're going in the right way. But the way that we move with that way, again, we just got to get people in on the same circle and get people in and having conversations, and it works out well. One of the kind of tell all response that I often use, being in community involvement and having the fact that we're always looking for volunteers and we're always looking for people's perspectives, it's very disarming to almost always respond with too much kindness and wanting to bring them into the fold. So if someone hits me with, you're part of the woke mob, you want to change the community, I've lived here for 45 years and I don't want to change my name, that's going to cost money, what are you going to do about it? I say, great, thank you for your perspective. Here's where you can sign up. I want to learn. Do you want to volunteer? Do you want to help? Almost always it either brings them in so we can have that conversation, or flip. They say, okay, that seems really complex. You guys, you folks can keep it.
I love it. In closing, we'll respect your time. Adam, I know that you've been kind enough to even potentially delay departure on a special family weekend to hang out with us. I appreciate that. Puneeta, I know you got a whole team you got to be talking to in just a minute. So I want to wrap. Again, the context of this is the leaders of today and tomorrow roundtable. These are 3 of the top 40 under 40 in Edmonton, as celebrated by Edify. And you can check out that issue. You can either check them out online, or of course you can find it on newsstands. Edify doing awesome work with their top 40 at edifyedmonton.com. And we're really proud to partner with Edify. This is, by the way, I want to throw this out there. This might make everybody feel just a tiny little bit awkward, but we booked this roundtable, then we told Edify. It's not like, hey guys, you got it. No, I actually called publisher Trudy Callahan this morning at like 10 after 8. I was like, by the way, there's a top 40. She was like, what? Really? That's amazing. I was like, yeah, I know. So we're just thrilled that the three of you have made time for us today. I want to ask you, I mean, you're leaders in your community, you're leaders in your friend groups, you're leaders in your extracurricular activities. What's a piece of advice that's resonated with you? What's a mantra that maybe you carry with you? What's a great book that you're reading right now or you've just read? You don't have to answer all of those. I just want each of you to take about a minute or whatever, however you feel led. And this is an audience that's always eager to learn. One of the reasons why I love this Real Talk community is that we become connected with people and ideas and resources that otherwise we wouldn't even hear about. So we've got three leaders here right now. Adam, what's something that's really kind of getting your wheels turning these days?
Well, I got two books that I've listened to. I'm not a very good reader, but I'm a great listener in the car. And so The Hard Thing About Hard Things is a remarkable book. It's probably not too revolutionary for most people. And Never Split the Difference is another good one. And I think that one piece of advice that I got that I would encourage absolutely everyone in every capacity to take, and one that, much to my detriment, I will hope my kids take, is take all of the advice that you can and then make sure that you make the decision that's right for you. And I think that, this world is full of advice. And if I'd listened to any of it 8 years ago, literally everyone that I talked to 8.5 years ago said, Bitcoin is not going to make it. Bitcoin ATMs are garbage. And there's no real business coming out of that. And I'm quite proud and happy to be sitting here having proved them wrong. And that's because I took advice. I listened to the caution. But then I ultimately made a decision that was right for me. And pretty happy about that.
What will your company do in annual revenue this year, do you think?
I don't know. I think if anyone on the board is listening, they just, their pants need to be changed. And so I will do them the favor of not answering that. However, I will say that we are releasing Q3 numbers like in a few weeks, and stay tuned.
Come on, stay tuned. people have listened.
I think it's like insider trading. If I
is it okay?
If I release things that are like before, so. No one wants to see me in jail, I don't think. I
don't want to see you in jail. It's not good for Real Talk if you're in jail. That's for sure.
That's true.
Oh, and also it's not good for you. So
right,
yeah.
Right.
Okay, good. The hard things about hard things. I got to check that out.
The Hard Thing About Hard Things. It's a remarkable book about an early tech CEO and his rise and his fall and his battles, and his triumphs, and it's a really great story. Cool. And I recommend you check it out. Lots of learnings.
I am going to check it out. I have lots to learn. People are going to be like, yeah, we know, Jespo. Robyn, how about you? What's something that's been inspiring you or sort of driving you forward as of late?
Well, I think that what I've been, like today's talk and what I've been thinking about a lot lately, and if I was to give any kind of advice to folks after this, especially with all this surreal top 40 stuff happening, is if you want to do something or if there's something you've been looking at, go out and do it. You'd be always shocked at how many organizations are looking for great people. And if you're listening to this, you are great people. Apply to that board position, apply to that job. That people are looking for great people. And I think that you'll often be surprised. You'll always shock yourself at what you can achieve if you go out and reach for it and apply for it and talk to people who are working in that area and learning more. We're always looking for good talent, especially in community organizations and volunteer roles. All the boards and organizations I'm a part of, they're always looking for people. So if you look at a position, feel that you may not be qualified or that you may not have the experience, I hate to break it to you, but it's a positive thing. You're probably wrong. You probably have the experience and you're good enough. Go out and get it. And I think you can.
I love it. Last word to Puneeta McBryan.
I have a lot to say, so I'll try to be brief. I'll stick to three things. So one, I have to say something that I've been struggling with since I found out I was on the list, which is just the reality that this list, and I don't want to say across the board because I'm positive there's exceptions, but I think most of us have a tremendous amount of privilege that have allowed us to succeed at this level at this age. Like, you know, in my case, I have an extremely supportive family. I didn't have to pay my own tuition. You know, I had the luxury of diving into things that may or may not have worked out because I always knew I had a safety net. Like, there's so many things that enable someone to climb fast. And so climbing fast isn't something that's available to anyone. So I just hate the idea that there's people out there that look at a list like this and feel bummed out. Either they're already 40 and they didn't achieve what they wanted to, or they just don't see it happening. And for that reason, I do think the list is a little bit of a shame in some ways. I know Edify is so sick of hearing about, you know, why is there no top 40 over 40 list? Mayor Sohi made a funny joke about that at the event. Yeah. So I get it. It is such an honor. It is a very cool list. I'm so excited to share this honor with my peers. But that's one message I want to make sure people take away, is that not everyone can you know, achieve everything that they wanted to achieve at such a young age. So there's that. 2, gratitude, I think, is probably sort of the most grounding undercurrent of my life. And it sounds cheesy. And again, it's, you know, especially when we're all living through the nightmare of this pandemic, it's hard to find things to be grateful for. But I really do think it's the thing that propels me forward more than anything. Like, I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. There's plenty of other things that have gone wrong along the way. And I think the thing that keeps me focused and keeps me moving forward and keeps me optimistic is the number of things that I have to be grateful for, but truly taking the time every day. And at this point, it's just a reflex. I don't even have to think about it anymore. But I think that being grounded in that gratitude is huge for leaders, because otherwise, especially what we're all collectively living through right now, you get pulled down pretty quick. And if you've got a team leaning on you or other, you know, folks leaning on you and relying on your leadership, you got to be grounded in something that keeps your head up. So that's it for me.
I love it.
Last thing, number 3, it's a book, but also a podcast. And she's so famous and everywhere now that it's probably being written off by a lot of people as just being like another mainstream leadership thing. But I think that would be a mistake, because I am such a huge Brene Brown fan, especially needing to be a leader at such a young age. Her philosophies and guidance on vulnerability and what she calls daring leadership have been such a North Star for me. So Dare to Lead is the book, Dare to Lead is the podcast. That article I talked about, Stop Telling Women They Have Imposter Syndrome. She does an incredible, I think, 2-part series, or at least one podcast episode with those writers that just totally changed my perspective on a lot of things when it comes to being a young woman of color in leadership. So those are my 3. Thanks so much.
If you have any pull with Brene Brown or her team, let us know, because we have an ask-in with her right now. Hoyles is corresponding with them, so if you maybe you could send something over from your official work account or something. Let her know what a thrill it was to be on Real Talk and take such great questions from such a gracious host, or something like that. Whatever you want to, yeah. Hey, it's no surprise to anybody that's tuned in to this show, to this episode, why the 3 of you are on this list of top 40 under 40. I hope that it never loses its push power. I was honored to be on that list, the inaugural one back in 2009, and it does something, like it or not. It does something. And it's like when we look at the NHL draft list of where people were drafted, you might just go back 15 years and you always want to be able to say, oh, good career, good. And then you see that one, you're like, ooh, you don't want to be the ooh. So you got to keep the pedal to the metal, baby. Congratulations, Adam O'Brien, the CEO of Bitcoin Well, Puneeta McBryan, Executive Director, Edmonton's Downtown Business Association, and Robyn Paches, co-founder of Workspace Co-working and president of the Oliver Community League. Mad love and much respect, you 3. Thanks for doing this. Love it. Brian. Yeah, you bet. You can check out edifyedmonton.com if you want to read more about these 3. They've done I mean, just a shout out to Trudy and her team at Edify and Kim and like the artistic directors, the photographers they work with. I mean, the writing is unbelievable. And of course, you never know. I mean, these are 3 off a list of 40. You never know who you might discover, who you might connect with. Be sure to check that out. Trash Talk still to come. We're going to get into some of your emails. We want to remind you that, we partner, of course, with the team at Eden Landscaping. They know a thing or two about meeting high expectations when you're investing in your outdoor space in landscape construction, design. You want it exactly how you want it. And Mike and his team at Eden, they don't stop until you're satisfied. Whatever your vision, they'll execute it with precise attention to detail. Check out on their website here. You can take a look at what they do, their services. I mean, people do those edible garden boxes. How cool is that? You need excavation done. You need ground leveled. Are you a little bit concerned right now about what the spring melt might do to your foundation? They can take a look at that. They do leveling on all kinds of applications, hardscaping. They've done amazing work with concrete, decorative brick, and outdoor other design. Did you see that I'm not a landscaper? So I was like brick and then I was like, what else? What's this? I'm trying to remember the name of the stuff. It's like deck board, but it's not. It's like synthetic.
Oh, like composite decking.
Composite decking.
Oh, of course, composite
decking. That's a thing, though. You don't have to stain your deck every 2 years. I was kind of.
It's wonderful.
It's like one of the things that comes with it. It's like one of the job hazards for Sam is that he knows at any point I'm going to fact check something, and you always are like, bang, that's what you mean. I'm like, attaboy, Sam. Attaboy, Brooksy. They do retaining walls. They do all kinds of water features. Eden Landscaping. You'll find them online at landscapeedmonton.ca. I'm on my way out to Sherwood Dodge today. I'm really excited to see their team. I'm going to check out one of these Jeep Grand Cherokee L's. I've been telling you about these. I saw one the other day. I sat in it. I was like, I need to drive one of these things. I need to see if this is a good fit for us. It's the first time that the best-selling SUV in North American history, the Grand Cherokee, has added a 3rd row of seating. So there's more room for, well, whatever you need. For us, it's golf clubs and snowboards and dog kennels and kids' toys. And, well, you know the deal. Whatever it is, if you need to get around, why not do it with that trusted brand? It's been reliable since inception. 1941, Jeep at Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge. Can you load up that picture for me from Mary Louise? I want to show that everybody that's checking this out on YouTube has a chance to see this. We had in my mind, a really, really special show yesterday, a Remembrance Day episode. If you missed it, be sure to check it out. I mean, some of the storytelling, unbelievable. And Mary Louise wrote to us shortly after. She said, when you signed off yesterday, Ryan, I cried. She says, I'm a real talker. I support you monthly on your Patreon. Mary Louise, thank you. You're amazing. She says, your last 2 sentences on the show just broke me up. My late father, Frank Gregotsky, age 18, served in the Canadian Navy from 1942 to 1944. He enlisted. Dad never spoke of the challenges that he faced. Let's take a look at this. Is who we're talking about here. It says, we 6 children, never heard him talking about it. Dad died in 93, 59 years of age. In the Merchant Marine, life was just quite simply not good. She says, that's my dad on the left. Mary Louise, thanks so much for sharing with us. Jill wrote in to say, my dad, and I want to be clear, I'm picking from, we got, our email inbox yesterday was unbelievable, and it means so much to us. If you don't hear your email read right away or the next day, hang tight, because we've always got a stack of great ones. Jill says, my dad was a British officer, injured 3 times during the war. My mom, a Canadian Red Cross nurse at a Canadian orthopedic hospital in Scotland. For unknown reasons, my dad ended up a British officer at the Canadian hospital, and that's where they met. Jill says, I heard much more about the war from my mother, and while sheltered from much of the war in Scotland, it was not a picnic, but most of the memories she shared were happy and about leaves to London. In 1945, after the war officially ended, my dad was assigned to an area of Italy to clear bodies. It was there that he stepped on a landmine and lost a leg. I just got chills. That particular day, another officer was with him and saved his life. And for months after, my mom, now in London, heading up the movement of war brides to Canada, received telegrams missing in action or injured with no specifics. I have those telegrams, says Jill, and they are chilling still. Information simply did not move as it does today, and obvious precautions remained in place. She says, also, I wanted to thank you all at Real Talk for adding a specific women's perspective to your program. That from Jill. Jill, thanks for that. I wanted to read this one from Owen because it jumped out at me. This is a hilarious start to the email. I love it. He says, Jespo, you know that thing when friends say to you, like, you got to watch this new show, or you got to subscribe, or you got to download this new podcast, and you just need to get through the first 2 or 3 episodes and then you'll get into it? He says, well, that happened to me with Real Talk. I've sort of had this strong itch that I should love your show due to a few factors, like, you know, we met a few times in past lives and we have mutual friends, says Owen. I'm not sure who, I'm like racking my brain, but I'm going to figure it out. But he says we've met before. He says, and I keep hearing rumblings of your show in our small town. He doesn't say where he is, but he's a 403, central southern Alberta maybe. He says it's impressive because small Alberta towns can be hard to reach for new media, but Real Talk is what they talk about here. He says, and the name of the show and blah, blah, blah. The thing is, I've tried to love your show and I've given it more than a few chances, but I just couldn't get into it. He says there was just no hook until now. He says November 10, episode 219, was engaging from start to finish. The hook, you were living in the gray areas. And I'm sure you've said that lots in other episodes, but it was the first time that I heard it. Therefore, I am in, says Owen. I'm listening. Keep talking. Boom. Love that. Well, no, you know, I wasn't going to read the last part, but I am going to read it. Fuck it. He says, I'm just understanding now why you're experiencing raging success. I get it now. I just okay, fine. I wanted to read that part. Phil wrote in to talk about our conversations around Alberta's Agriculture Minister Devin Dreeshen resigning from his ministry due to allegations and a lawsuit involving the Premier's office that alleges that there's been a culture of drinking and drunkenness at the Alberta legislature. We talked about it. I talked about how I don't necessarily think that the most egregious part of the famed Sky Palace photo with Jason Kenney and senior cabinet ministers was the alcohol. That wasn't, to me, the biggest deal. We talked about how we have a beer fridge here at Real Talk, and we talked about members of our team that teetotal and members of our team that'll crack a beer after the show, and we talked about some of the gray areas and the complexities, and that's just the type of conversation we endeavor to have here. We had one this morning about pipelines. Same sort of a thing. We've talked about when the flag should go back up. You know, the flags on Parliament Hill and a whole bunch of other stuff. You're smiling. I feel like I want to give you a chance to interject. You've got this kind of like gleam in your eye, Hoyles, and I just want to. Is there something that you would like to insert into the conversation?
Well, you just know I'm opening a can of worms. That's what that look on my face.
It's kind of part of your job.
Okay, challenge accepted. No, just teetotaler. I hate that expression. I hate it because it sounds like I'm the teetotaler. But I'm not. Like, I don't.
That's not an insult. My family. I grew up in a teetotal household. I never saw that as a self-deprecation or any sort of insult.
For me, it just feels like I'm sitting in a corner.
Okay.
Being like, you've had one, and you've had one.
Oh, I
and
see.
You've had two. Oh, okay. No, you've got. I don't give a rat's ass.
You've made that very clear.
What anybody else drinks.
Yeah, for sure.
I do not care.
For sure.
As long as they're not coming at me being like, drink.
Yeah.
Then I'm like,
yeah.
Bye-bye. So yeah.
Then you're giving them the chrétien salute.
Chrétien.
Yeah. That was just for purposes of accuracy. That's how he pronounces his last name, not making a mockery of the French language. More on that in a minute. So Phil emails in and he says, I've been listening to your conversations about alcohol in the workplace, and I've been trying to sort of like figure out where the line is for me. He says, I'm coming at this as an employee and a person that enjoys a glass of wine or a craft beer, but I'm also an HR professional. So I've been on both sides of it. He says, in my opinion, it's one thing if you're drinking socially after hours. It's another thing entirely if it's during the workday or in your office. Or in the former minister's case, behind closed doors with the, quote, shields up and an alleged secret password. Phil says, I don't have a problem with people having a drink if they're at a dinner meeting or if they're after hours or something like, you know, if they're traveling for work or they're taking a client to a hockey game. But if they're working, it should be done responsibly because they're still representing their organization, 100%. He says, I guess I'd put it in two categories. You know, drinking at work during office hours is usually going to result in immediate termination. Or drinking at a work function after hours or while traveling, okay, but be responsible. If you're hammered, you may not get fired, but it's going to be frowned upon for sure. You know, I had a VP of HR that I worked for that once said, if you have a glass of wine or two with dinner while you're traveling for work, expense it and don't worry about it. If you have an entire bottle, it better not be on the receipt. So what you do for that is just make sure you order sort of like 5 glasses, not the bottle. No, I kid, Sarah, I kid. Don't drink, kids. So the Sky Palace dinner, for example, says Phil, I don't specifically have a problem with the fact they were drinking. Most of my outrage was primarily about flaunting COVID restrictions. You and me both, Phil. He says, but there are like some fair questions about the amount that was being consumed there as well. If I remember correctly, it was 2 bottles of wine on the table and a bottle of Jameson's. Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm pulling this photo up.
Okay, well, I guess I could call it up too, and we'll just do it real quick, even though, this makes for bad radio. But you know what? This is so funny. You just Google Sky Palace photo, and it's coming up. There it is. So let's take a look here, and let's be accurate. Let's make sure that we're going to...
there's a lot of bottles of
Pellegrino
soda water.
Yeah, exactly. So there's 2 bottles of wine. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4 bottles of Pellegrino, and there's 1 bottle of Jameson's whiskey. So there's
I stand
2 bottles.
corrected.
Yeah, 2 bottles of wine between, and there were at least 2 other people at that table between. Like that's in my mind. I'm not giving. It's totally reasonable. It's
all I was seeing.
If I was hosting that dinner, there'd be more than that.
All I was seeing was bottles.
Yeah.
I wasn't.
Yeah, no.
I didn't do the zoom in, and so that's my mistake.
I will say if it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bottles of wine on the table, that would be a bit of a different story. Okay, so anyway, so back to Phil. He says, should people be responsible, like the Premier said, in reference to Dreeshen? Absolutely. But if you're working and drinking at work during office hours, totally irresponsible. 10 plus years ago, you could go for lunch, have a beer with a coworker or a client. Nowadays, most organizations have a policy you can't return to the office if you do, and that seems about right to me. That from Phil. That's a great email, Phil. Thanks very much. On multilingualism. We've been talking a lot about it this week. Number one, because of an amazing email from a real talker by the name of Michael asking why I get a pass on invoking a sort of a Quebecois accent in paraphrasing Yves-François Blanchet, leader of the Bloc Québécois. It was a great email. Michael basically is like, can you do like Scottish, Italian, Irish, like white, Caucasian, or he's like, I don't think that Jespo would do a Chinese accent on the show or a Kenyan accent or something along those lines. And Michael's email has spurred so many other emails. And then, of course, we talked about Air Canada's CEO saying, I've lived in Montreal for like 14 years and I don't have to speak French. And then, I'm being unfair because he basically was like, and that's a testament to the people of Montreal. It's kind of like when you like step in the cow pie, but you realize you're not like all the way, it's not oozed up the side of the soles of your shoe yet. So you can still kind of extricate it, and then you just have the grips on the bottom. The sole of the shoe has the cow pie on it, but it's not gone up to the sides, And so that's what he did. He caught himself in the cow pie, like just like 30% of the way in, and then he tried to get his way out by complimenting Montreal. And Leanne wrote in to say, first of all, Real Talk is absolutely amazing. Thank you, Leanne. Be calm. It's more from a be calm because they're like tactical about things. They don't just throw praise around willy-nilly. She says, I'm excited to tune in every morning, whether it's live or on YouTube or sometimes after my morning meetings. I truly appreciate the diversity of guests and the important conversations that take place. I am guilty of heavily leaning into my left-wingedness, and tuning into your show reminds me it's possible and vital to have conversations across the aisle. That's music to my ears, Leanne. She says, I'm writing to talk about the past few days' conversation on multilingualism. Like many others, I come from an immigrant family. My parents didn't speak much English while we were growing up. They still don't. So my brother and I are still fluent in Cantonese, which is largely a conversational language. They put us into a Mandarin bilingual school where we both learned how to read, write, and speak in Mandarin. And through school, we were taught that Canada is about diversity. Now, whether or not that's truly embraced by everybody, I don't know. But if we were to truly embrace it as a foundation of being Canadian, knowing our native languages, whether they're Cantonese, Mandarin, Punjabi, Arabic, Tagalog, Korean, and English and French would make us even more Canadian. On the learning side of things, I totally relate to Sarah's feeling of being embarrassed about her accent. I started learning French in high school, and while I was great at the reading and the writing, I always got a version of stage fright trying to speak it. I can still read, write, and listen, but my French speaking skills definitely need some work. On the other hand, I managed to learn Spanish. Of course you did, Leanne. In 6 weeks. So Leanne so far is speaking Mandarin, Cantonese, English. She's functional in French, and she's learning Spanish. Unless she's forgotten to list some, she's speaking, at least to a certain degree, a minimum of 5 languages. She was on an exchange in Mexico in 2017. When I came back, She says, I didn't have much of an opportunity to practice, but I've recently moved in with a roommate who's Mexican and learning English. How great is this? So we both just push our fear to the side. Now we're able to have full-on multilingual conversations. That must be a trip to listen to. How cool is that? Learning the language from each other, going both ways. When it comes to learning languages, I always think about how I react when a non-native English speaker is talking to me. I never judge them, especially knowing how much my parents continue to struggle through daily tasks like shopping and banking and reading letters like government correspondence. What I find is that most people are excited you're speaking to them in their language and they're happy to help you learn. Leanne says, sorry for the long email. Languages is a topic I really enjoy talking about. Don't apologize for the email. That was fantastic. And a ton of context there from Real Talker Leanne.
I guess there's that sentiment when someone speaks and they have an accented, like if they're speaking English and they don't sound like Albertan, and they get told, go back to where you came from.
Yeah.
And I'm just always like, I love the point when people say, like, if someone is speaking English in an accent, not from Alberta or Canada, it's like fill in the blank. That means usually that they can speak another language.
Totally.
So, dude,
we just
check yourself.
Here's some real talk. We had an Uber ride 2 nights ago that went sideways. And this is just real talk. My buddy, I'm not going to say his name, but a buddy of mine, he's just a beauty. Like, he's a beauty. Travels all over the world. Good. Hoyles, fair question. Good beauty or bad beauty?
Good beauty, because you sometimes like the term.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
The term beauty can be
like, that guy's a real beauty. Look at that beauty. You know, drunk before noon. Look at that beauty. Pee in his pants. Or that guy is a beauty for sure. He is a good beauty.
Okay, got it.
And he's well traveled. He's very curious and welcoming to other cultures. He's just a wonderful guy. He lived and worked in Saudi Arabia. He's studied and lived in Belgium. He's traveled all of Central America. He's traveled into Africa. Like, he's just a great guy. Southeast Asia. And I think that he's sort of like I know he meant it in the best way. So we get into an Uber, and this guy with like a heavy African accent is like sort of welcoming us into the car and, come on in and get your seatbelts on and let's go. And so my pal just is, as he's putting up a seatbelt, he's like, where are you from, my friend? And the guy's like, where am I from? And I'm like, oh, like in the back, because I'm just like, gee. And like, I kind of like have my mask on. So I'm like, nice. And so I like kind of turn my face to the window and I'm like kind of looking out. And they had like what actually turned into an amazing conversation. If I would have, like, why would I record it? But if I would have had it recorded, I would play it here, because it was actually this like wonderful kind of back and forth, but the temperature started really hot. Like almost right away, because this guy's probably so sick and tired of people asking that question. It comes with all these implications. And
maybe unpack that.
Me? Well, it's not my place to unpack, but
the idea that when people are like, where are you from? That implies that you're not
from here, for starters.
Like, you don't belong.
You don't belong, or you're not from here, for starters, or like your language skills are insufficient. I mean, I've not walked miles in the shoes, so I can't kind of explain exactly why this guy got so hot so fast.
No, but why? I guess what my question was, for clarification, is just to like illuminate why that might be a problem.
Got it. Like, why don't you touch a black woman's hair or anyone's hair, right? So I can't like exactly say why, except to say the obvious observations that just don't. But if you need to learn more about that or anything else, go to reputable sources on the World Wide Web, and there's been a lot of people with lived experience writing about it, and it's great to know. Yeah. So anyway, by the end of it, they're like, fist pounding, my man. Like, by the time the guy dropped us off, and we were traveling about 7 minutes, by the time he dropped us off, I was like, are you guys just going to keep driving around tonight together? Like, you guys want to just hang out? They're like new pals, right? And it was great. And there was kind of a learning moment for everybody, but it started super hot. And it was, yeah. Anyway, these things happen. It's all the spirit of, I think, and my pal, certainly the minute he realized that what had happened right away. I mean, he was like, speaking of like the cow pies and the shoes, his was like under the cow. It was like in his socks. He tried to step out of it and the shoe stayed in the cow pie, if you know what I'm talking about. But then he saved it. And it was a positive moment. Danielle wrote in to say, I'm writing in response to the interview you had with Simon-Pierre Poulin and Dr. Ashley Nunez about bilingualism in business. Air Canada CEO, French and English, Canada, bigger picture, wider lens. These are all my words. This isn't Danielle's email. Back to her. She says, I'm really surprised at how much I reflected on the interview once the show was over. Let me preface that despite my name, and we don't use last names on the show usually unless anyone asks us to, but she said, I'm not French. I was born and raised in Edmonton. My only experience of the French language was 6 mediocre years of passably taught Franglish in Alberta's education system. But I do reflect that when my parents died, so did the culture and the language that they were raised in, both Ukrainian and German. And they didn't pass it on to subsequent generations, thinking English was the best chance for future generations to succeed in Canada. And it's in this context that I reflect on the interview. I believe that the problem is not the CEO of Air Canada not speaking French, nor should he have to carry the burden of past historical grievances of the Quebecois or Francophone solely on his shoulders alone. I think my concern, and maybe the concern that your guest, Mr. Poulin, had, is that there is seemingly a larger trend that bilingualism, as it relates to French language and culture, is secondary but not equal to English in the pecking order of government institutions in Canada. I work in an area where I can see and, in fact, monitor trends as it relates to schools, hospitals, and access to support services specific to immigrant communities. The fact is, especially in Edmonton and Alberta, the biggest source of growth is from immigrant communities. One of the fastest growing communities is from French-speaking areas of African nations like Eritrea, Ethiopia, Sudan, Nigeria, Cameroon. The need for access to support and education in French is at a critical high. My point is that people need supports for access to bilingual services, and it's not just a Quebecois issue. The solution is not simply, well, they can speak English if they have to. Don't even get me started on the desperate need for translation services in settings outside of government-run institutions. The conversation was great as a reminder that these issues that affect Confederation and support services for non-English languages is still there, and arguably it's as big as it ever has been, and optics still very much matter. That a great email from Danielle. Thanks so much. I really, really appreciate everybody that takes a minute to chime in and to comment in particular about either conversations we've had, interviews we've had on the show, or in some circumstances, interviews we have coming up. Don't ever underestimate our interest in your perspective. A lot of times it really informs our editorial process. Trash Talk in just a second. I wanted to remind you, first of all, the team at Park Power wants to take $70 and just give it to you. That's why the promo code 2021-RealTalk is there at parkpower.ca. They're your friendly local utilities provider. You can compare rates on electricity, natural gas, and internet. You can look at their fixed versus variable rate pricing. And the best part, I love this about how Park Power rolls, you're never locked in. So you want to change it on a month-to-month basis? I mean, that sounds like a lot of work. I'm not the type to be changing around every month. But, I mean, if that's you, you go fixed versus variable, variable versus fixed. Parkpower.ca is where you can make it happen. And 10% of their electricity profits go back to nonprofits in the community. That's what we love about them at Park Power. You can find them online via the sponsors tab at ryanjesperson.com. The pregnant pause is it's people that aren't all of a sudden they're like back. It works. Localwaste.ca. Everybody, this is where everybody like does up their seatbelts. Localwaste.ca has a great list of services that they can provide: business, commercial, multifamily, curbside, construction, demolition, landfill. There's a huge demolition going on a few doors down from us right now. I popped by yesterday. I'm walking the dog. I'm like, you guys have your bin lined up? Hey, man. We're proud to partner with the team at Local Waste. You can go online right now, find a quote, Alberta, Saskatchewan, plus they're always growing their company. Again, at localwaste.ca. Every Friday as we wrap up our broadcast week, our friends at Local Waste give us a wonderful opportunity, a cathartic moment, or 6 or 7, to get things off our chest. It's a tradition that we refer to as Trash Talk. All right, this one from Kim. Kim, I'm sick for you. She says, I certainly hope that the porch pirates who stole my Talking to Canadians book by Rick Mercer, my bathtub pillow from Amazon, and my HelloFresh box are enjoying these items. Maybe they needed them more than me. If you stole these items just for kicks, may the book give you paper cuts, may you scald yourself in the tub, and may you get food poisoning. Sincerely, one angry mom unable to relax to her fullest extent. That from Kim. And don't forget, Rick Mercer joins us later this month to talk about his book, Talking to Canadians. This one from Linda, who says, what is it about Alberta drivers? They have to wait until the last possible second before zipping across three lanes of traffic to make their turn. Are they mentally incapable of planning ahead just so they can get in the proper lane? Or do they just love scaring the bloody bejesus out of everybody behind them? Do they lack impulse control and just have to have that item from Walmart over there right now? Come on, people, use your feckin' brains and think about where you're going and get in the right lane before you give somebody a heart attack. That from Linda. Texted, not while driving. Thanks, Linda. Job well done. This one, I promise this one from Merrick the Redhead Prick. I didn't call Merrick that. Merrick's calling himself that. I think gingers are fantastic. My best friends are gingers. Merrick says, I'd love to be able to speak French. My French teacher kicked me out of class in grade 4 because I wasn't a great student, and I didn't have to take French in high school because, thankfully I was able to get my life back together after having a learning disability. My mom fought tooth and nail to have the proper resources there for me. Says I've owned my home in St. Albert for close to a decade. A beautiful neighborhood school literally in my backyard. Turns out my 4-year-old, though, won't be able to attend a francophone school even if we want that because neither my wife or I parlez-vous français. I'm just reading his email. He says, thankfully, there's an inconvenient option of like French immersion in a 10-minute drive away. He says, we're grateful. He says, can I also comment on everything that kind of like seems, I don't know. He says, I dream of a world where all Canadian children can go to the school in the backyard, no matter what the language that his or her parents speak. Access is important here. He says, I apologize for all the grammar and spelling errors, Jespo. I'm just a welder. Merrick, you have a... He actually says I'm just a dumb welder, but some of my buddies that are welders are like, they don't mess around. Welding is an art. Welding is an art. There's no such thing as a dumb well, I don't know if there is. Maybe someone's going to be like, my pal Larry in Athabasca, he's a dumb welder. I'll go, hey, let's have Larry have his say. Maybe Larry should have his say. I'm way off track. So I'm going to get back to Redhead Prick Merrick, who says, Sarah, agreed. He kind of like comes at you, but I think he misunderstood you because he says with pipelines in the leaks, it's not a question of if, but when, and it's how well maintained they are, like planes, trains, and automobiles, and then in all caps, love to all. Merrick, we love it. Did you want to comment? You agree, right?
I said lay off the Larry is what I wanted to say. Lay off the Larry.
It's a name that triggers me.
I know, you gotta knock it off.
How about this one from Barubi, who says, I'm a little pissed off. Jespo, Leela here, you had that exclusive with her. She's not getting any credit from me for her criticism of the premier. I guess because it's all because of his leadership, she says. Like in what way? I don't love that he runs things like a king, but that's like one thing. What about the issues? Does she think that universities should get their funding back? Does she want to shut down all the coal mining in the foothills? Would she retrofit school ventilation? Does she want to stop privatization of services at hospitals? Does she sign a healthcare deal? Would she scrap the curriculum? I didn't hear anything on issues, just on Kenny's personal leadership, and that is a meh from me. That from Barubi. What about this one from Mike, who says, okay, I get it. The Alberta government, a lot of people think it's brutal. Maybe the worst the province has ever seen. Hell, the Trump years were bad and horrible too, and what 45 was doing was certainly appalling, and I'd never defend him nor Jason Kenney, but can we please stop comparing governments and politicians to the Nazis? I see it all the time, comparing an obviously garbage government and a repugnant human like Donald Trump to the absolute extreme, the Nazi party. That's extremely offensive. Every time somebody makes the connection, I just can't help but feel what it feels like. It lessens the impact of what those monsters did through World War II. Nobody's pulling people up out of their homes and sending them to death camps or executing them in the streets. Kenny sucks, the UCP sucks, but stop with the comparisons, especially around this time of remembrance. Let's be better. That from Mike. I agree with you, Mike, 100%. And how about this one from Allison RN? She says, I'm just writing in response to your Trash Talk November 5th last week that had to do with cannabis edibles. I know this is a segment for people to get things off their chest, but this ER nurse feels the need to correct a couple of things. While I do agree, with the other Real Talker that it's very unlikely your kids are going to be given an edible in the Halloween candy, some bad medical advice was inadvertently given out. The assertion that a cannabis product won't harm your kids, so don't bother seeking medical care, that is incorrect. If we're talking about an adult-sized 16-year-old 14-year-old, sure, maybe riding it out is a prudent option. But if we're talking about a young child, you absolutely need to seek medical advice if they ingest cannabis. It could lead to a toxidrome that can be dangerous. And I've seen multiple children admitted into the ICU post-ingestion. Now, we all of them, by the way, have been from unsecured edibles in the home, not from Halloween candy, but still inform your audience, Ryan. We want you to come to emergency. We want you to call an ambulance if you think you need it. We'd rather see you well and your high child well than have you ride something out at home with you need to be with us. If you're not sure, call 811 or the Poison and Drug Info Line, Paches, and receive medical advice that way. Says, and with regards to all these studies and articles, says, I'm not a fear-mongering loon. I just want people to enjoy responsibly and know what to do should things go wrong. I absolutely love it, Allison RN. That's a great point. And thanks for chiming in. What a week it's been. Highlight after highlight, back-to-back jacks from producer Sarah Hoyles, producer Samuel Brooks. Hey, if you're on Sunday morning with some time on your hands and you want to see me make my debut with Rosemary Barton, we'd love to have you tune in coast to coast. And we've got a great show coming up at you on Monday. Affectionately dubbed Her Deepness by New York Magazine, Dr. Sylvia Earle, one of the world's top experts on ocean science and conservation, joins us. Plus, Dorothy Palmer on her new book, Falling for Myself, and a men's health roundtable later next week. Oh, yeah, next week, we're going to start telling you about our Real Talk Cask 1 bourbon. Consider it launched, baby. Have a great weekend, and thanks for spending some time with Real Talk.